Like I was sitting on the edge of my bed and then I wasn't. I was like, okay, I can go over there towards that loving entity, or I can go back there to my happy existence.
Hey, everybody, I want to welcome you back to another episode of Soul Inspired. Today, I have Heather Fischbuch with me. She is a doctor of traditional medicine, and Chinese medicine, I should say, and she's also had a near-death experience in her life. And we're going to talk about her experience and things that have happened. I want to say thank you to everybody that's been following and leaving comments and having discussions in the comment section because it's really helping the algorithm and get our word out to everybody and get these videos out. So first of all, thank you, Heather, for coming on today and joining the Soul Inspired episode here.
Glad to be here. Looking forward to our conversation, Joe.
I say this in almost every episode. I'm sure my listeners are loving it, but I generally don't go into details finding out about my guests. I like to find out on the spot. It makes it more, um, the flow just kind of moves better because I feel like I'm speaking for my audience. So I don't know too much about you, but I do know you've had an experience, and I do know you've had some life experience. So we'll talk about that. So one of the first questions I ask everybody is, if you think of that major experience in your life that you had, or the event, or the complete package of the event, if you think about who you were before that, would you be able to paint a picture of who Heather Fischbuch was before everything happened?
Yeah, I sure can. Um, I'm a 62-year-old woman. I've had a very active life and I've moved a lot. I'm in Canada and mostly lived in mountain and forest areas. I've been feeling very blessed about where I've lived. And the last 14 years, I've called Invermere, British Columbia home, which is a little slice of heaven. It's got lakes and mountains and beauty galore. Nature is important to me, and I've spent a lot of time enjoying its recreation here. I moved from beautiful places in Alberta to this place so that I didn't have to drive 3 hours to get to my recreation. I could basically just choose front door or back door. Is it this mountain or is it that lake? And I feel really happy to be here for the last number of years. Um, I'm active. I grew up on a ranch and rode horses most of my life, and then transitioned once my kids were grown into bikes and hiking boots, and moved here as a divorced woman in my early 50s, and just loved life here, loved the recreation, enjoyed my work. I, at that time, owned a spa. So it was a pretty nice existence, and was also kind of blessed with pretty good health all my life. I was very active, um, and able to hike and bike and kayak and ski and do all the things that a lot of the locals do here. It's a very active community. In fact, it has the most gold medal Olympics retired people that live in the world are in this community.
Oh,
It's
wow.
probably 6 or 8 of those, and lots of extreme athletes. And there's just a lot of really excellent recreational opportunities in our area.
Great. Okay. Well, thanks for sharing that. Doesn't sound that bad at all. So you have nature around you. You went through, obviously, you mentioned you were just recently divorced, or maybe you've been divorced for a while, but you were, um, moving out on your own in your 50s, or not,
Yes.
but before then, life wasn't too terrible. It doesn't sound like. It sounds like you lived a pretty normal lifestyle. Is that
Yeah,
fair to
I would
say?
say busy, as a lot of people in our time period of living are. I often had to work multiple jobs, and my ex-husband worked really hard. He was employed in forestry, so we lived in beautiful forest locations, and my kids, had the average existence of sports and school and teenage ups and downs and all the rest of that. But yeah, I had a fun life for the most part. Some stress and some bumps along the road, but had was really, like I say, I celebrated my health and felt that I was taking really good care of my health as a massage therapist. And I used to own a health food store. So I did a lot for my health.
Hmm.
And in moving to this area, felt like I was making a really good choice. And I've loved living here, and feel like it just got better when I made that choice. My kids were grown, and as I was saying, so it was like, okay, this move was for me. It was
Hmm.
my career for the things that I love doing, and I felt really happy in my existence here.
I mean, that paints a picture of what life was like, and I really appreciate that. I always like to just know, leading up to someone's, experience or what happened in their life, what was going before, right? It kind of just paints a picture for everybody to hear. So let's lead up to what happened and when it was. And if you want to explain that, like I don't know how long ago this was, if you can explain that too, and what the event was that happened to you.
Certainly. So last January, I was 5 years into my acupuncture Chinese medicine practice and had really kind of felt like I was on top of the world. The practice was booming. I was doing very, very well, working at a comfortable pace, loved my work, and rewarded myself with a lovely holiday to Mexico. So we went hiking and biking and swimming and kayaking and doing all those things I enjoyed in a new location in the middle of winter. So it was a icing on the top of the cake scenario. And my partner and I, had activities every day with snorkeling and hiking and biking. And so it was a very active holiday. And as many people in the Western world know, once you go away to a hot destination, returning in the middle of winter can sometimes be a challenge. So from plus 25 in the Mexico airport to minus 35 and windy in the Calgary airport, and drive home after you scrape off the inch of ice and snow on the vehicle just was not a fun experience. So I returned from my holiday and felt like I had a holiday hangover the next day. I kind of woke, and it wasn't a alcohol induced hangover. It was just oh my gosh, why did we do this minus 35 stuff?
Okay.
And I hurt. My head hurt. I was groggy. I felt not my usual healthy, bouncy self. Um, so I was saying, oh, well, got to get on with the day. I love my work. I'm going to head off to my clinic. So I was getting dressed and ready to go off to the clinic and get organized for my first day back at work. And I tipped over when I was putting my socks on. Like, I have very good balance. We talked about the hiking, biking, skiing, all that
Right.
stuff. And I tipped over and kind of lost consciousness partially, but I was still aware of my body. I was, I would call it an in between place. Like I was sitting on the edge of my bed and then I wasn't. I was on the floor and I knew my body was on the floor and I could feel and see my body or peripheral, be aware of my body, but I couldn't make my body do anything for a few seconds.
Hmm.
And it was the longest few seconds of my life. I don't know if it literally was the 10 seconds that I think it was, or if it might have been 10 minutes. I'm not sure. But in that in between place, I kind of had a thought that's like, okay, I can go over there towards that loving entity, or I can go back there to my happy existence. And I'm sort of in between the two. And I was sort of caught in between that place. And it wasn't a panic situation. I didn't cry out or feel stressed or alarmed. It's like just at peace. And well, this is weird. Why do I have to make a choice? Both choices are good choices.
Hmm.
So anyway, I just kind of did some deep breaths and like I say, was aware of my existence and kind of wiggled myself a little bit to see if anything was uncomfortable from tipping over and landing however I landed. I don't think I landed on my head, but I probably landed on my shoulder and my head was on the ground and feeling very heavy. It was like I was moving through thick mud. And it's like, okay, well, things are moving. I'm still breathing. Let's go back and see what happens as the day unfolds. So I made the choice to push myself up through that thick feeling and continue getting dressed. Still had the headache, still had this is a weird feeling kind of day. So took myself off to work and went through my work day. As my work day progressed, you heard that I was an acupuncturist.
Mhm.
I was dropping things. And it's not in good form to drop acupuncture needles. They're one-time use,
Right.
and you need fine dexterity to put them in the exact right place. And my right hand had pretty good dexterity, always has, and I am right-handed, but my left hand felt like it was still in the mud. Like it was just like I could make it do stuff, but it was slow and clumsy. And when I tried to take needles out with my left hand, which is pretty common for me, I would had a hard time holding them. So I was taking them out and I was dropping them in the receptacle that we put them in, and they wouldn't hit the right place. My left hand was becoming clumsy. And then when I was typing my reports after a couple of these drops, my left hand became like a flipper. It wasn't like a fingers that could move dexterously. I was making typing errors and it was becoming like a clump of mud rather than individual fingers moving. So I canceled my last couple of clients and said, okay, I'm not having a good health day. I better see you on another day. I need to take care of myself for the remainder of the day. So I went home and made myself some tea and some soup, comfort foods that we do when we're not feeling good. And still hadn't really occurred to me that, what was going on. But I thought, okay, headache, clumsiness, maybe I've got a pinched nerve from all that shivering and cold coming back to the minus 35. And I need to take care of myself. Well, I couldn't taste or feel the temperature of the tea or soup on the left side of my face. And I couldn't hold the mug or the soup ladle with my left hand. So when I couldn't feel temperature as well as the clumsiness of my left side, it dawned on me that I was having a stroke.
Wow.
And I phoned a friend and I said, can you come over? I think I'm having a stroke. Well, I'd had the stroke a couple of hours before that in the morning when I had fallen on the floor. But
Mm.
because I'm so healthy, I just thought, oh, I'm really tired. Feeling like I tipped over unbalanced, again, the pinched nerve thing came into mind. So I didn't go into that place of
Mhm.
analyzing my own health appropriately because I didn't expect a stroke. As I painted in the previous discussion, I was super healthy. I have low blood pressure. I have a low body mass index. I had just hiked and biked, 15, 20 kilometers every day for the last 14 days.
Mhm.
So it was unexpected to have a stroke, but that's indeed what had happened.
Okay, wow. So thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate it. Got some questions. And before I ask those questions, did you go and confirm the stroke? Did you go to a hospital? What was just want to know a little brief detail about that. How did you confirm it was a stroke?
So I'm going to jump into the rest of that day a little
Okay,
bit. And
sure.
I certainly did go and get it confirmed. So anyway, my friend, as I was a trained doctor and acupuncturist, we do have a stroke protocol in our tool bag. So once I had made the brain connection of temperature, there's more to this than a pinched nerve. I went into waiting for my friend to arrive to drive me to get it hospital or checked out or do what I needed to. And it didn't occur to me to phone the ambulance. I don't know why I phoned a friend, but there again, my brain was not quite its usual self. Um, So anyway, I plunked in the needles that we do for an acupuncture protocol for stroke. And at that, we were still wearing masks at this time. So in my clinic, I was wearing a mask all day. When I came home, I was more hungry and tired, so I just fixed the soup and the tea without really looking at myself. But now that I hadn't had the connection that I couldn't feel temperature, I better go check myself out for stroke protocol. So I went and did the tongue curls, the looking at my eye, the looking at the face, the tests with your hands and your arms. Can you raise them? I did all the test protocols that are common for stroke. And sure enough, it was a stroke. It wasn't a pinched nerve. My face was sagged. I couldn't curl my tongue. I couldn't lift one arm equal to the other. It was always lower. I
Mm,
could still move my hand, but it, like I said, it moved like a flipper, not a hand. So, yes, I had confirmed it to my degree of, yes, this is a stroke. Did the stroke protocol. My friend arrived, and because it was minus 35 kind of day, I said, okay, I want to do some heat stuff before we go to the hospital. And there again, not thinking too clearly, but I did some moxa, which is another form of Chinese medicine for stroke. So I did the heating points on those same points that I did for stroke in my scalp, in my eyebrows, in the side of my face that was becoming paralyzed, in my hand, in my arm. And then we went and got it checked out at the local clinic. And the doctor and my face bounced back within an hour or an hour and a half. It came back, and it by the time I was, admitted in the hospital and all the rest of that, they were sort of saying, "Well, you look pretty normal," because my literally bounced back within that couple of hours.
right.
But we'll send you off for a CT scan and see what's going on. And yes, this headache is concerning, and yes, this temperature thing that you had described is all problematic. But I was busy treating myself. I didn't take any before and after pictures.
Mm,
But what I had explained to them was consistent with the outline of a stroke. So they did believe me. And the CT scan, when we got it back, showed that I had a, 2 centimeter by 1 centimeter blob of a blood clot on the back occipital area of my brain,
mm.
consistent with my symptoms of paralysis on my left side. So yes, indeed, it was a stroke.
Wow. And would they consider that a mini stroke or a full stroke?
No, this is a big stroke.
Okay.
If I hadn't treated it, I would be paralyzed on my left side.
Wow. So yeah, and I was gonna ask that before. I'm gonna go back in a moment to the experience you had, but I did want to ask, from what I'm gathering, it was the work that you were doing on yourself that really helped you along the way with the Chinese medicine type
Yes, I
acupuncture.
I I really appreciate living in this time and era that we have all the modern conveniences of testing and CT scans and MRIs and all the emergency room medicine that we have. That being said, I didn't receive any. I didn't have any drugs. I didn't have any clot busters. I didn't have any medications because what I was using, the acupuncture and the moxa, did the job of moving the clot, and I was already in recovery by the time I was assessed at the hospital.
Yeah. Yeah, I was gonna say, I think, and that's the thing. We've kind of lost touch with ancient healing traditions, right? And it's more, but again, modern medicine is extremely important as
And I'm by
well.
no means I'm no means telling everybody that they should run to their acupuncturist when they're having a stroke.
Right.
Clot busting drugs work. And
That's
I
right.
was lucky. I wasn't in my right head saying, "Oh, let's phone an ambulance and get me some clot busting drugs." I said, "Well,
Right.
I know how to do this. I'll do this while I'm waiting to get to the hospital." So
That's right.
part
Yeah,
of
I
this
mean,
was my stroke-addled brain not
mhm.
making too much sense at that time either.
And most of us aren't walking around as a doctor of traditional Chinese medicine or have somebody in our household or a friend
Yeah.
that knows these things. So definitely, if you're feeling any symptoms of a stroke, get to a hospital, get to an emergency, get to a medical professional that can help you. Jumping back for a moment to the experience you had, you you said you kind of tipped over I think you said it was when you were maybe I'm forgetting, but you were tying your shoe or putting your shoes on, or you were
I was getting dressed for work. I was putting my
right.
socks. So I had my clothes on. I
Hmm.
was dressed. Socks were last thing.
Hmm.
And my balance and like I said, I was clumsy. I was headachy. I felt like I had the worst hangover of my life, but I don't drink.
You
Yes.
tipped over, you knew something was a little off. And as that was happening, you said you were kind of in an in-between place. And I hear about this, especially with um, I've talked to many people who've had NDEs at this point and many to come, and their experiences, although different, have a lot of similarities quite often. Yours resembles if I were to put it similar to another NDE I've heard, it would be more those quick exits. And what I mean by that is there are times where someone say had a car accident, and 1 minute they're here, and the next minute they're kind of like not here. There's no the there's no pain. Like it's not a long process as they're coming out of their bodies or leaving this consciousness. It's like you're there and then you're not. And it sounds like when you were tipping over, you were kind of in it. You were almost like you were still here in your body, but you were also like outside being given an option. And you mentioned this entity. You said there was a feeling of an entity. Could you dive into that a little bit further? It may be difficult to explain, but can you explain that a bit further?
So I would call myself a spiritual person.
Mhm.
I've had lots of really great experiences. I sang in a choir as a kid. I've, grew up in a belief pattern of thinking of a spirit that's bigger than myself or bigger than being a human. Um, and I I agree with you that I was here one moment and I was in an in-between place that I was not familiar with the next. It wasn't a painful exit. It was just oh, you don't have consciousness, you're on the floor. And I've also in my reading of near-death experiences, I've read that you kind of look down on your body and can see it. And that's what it felt like. Is
Mhm.
it just felt like, oh, there I am. Well, look at that. You're kind of all crumpled and in a weird position. And, I'm literally kind of wiggling around and saying, can I feel? Can I move? Can I be? And and as I'm doing that, assessment, it was like over here, Heather, like there was a little bit of not a puppet, but a voice or a spirit or a entity, for lack of a better word, saying, you're okay. We've got you. You can come here with us. This is a safe place. This is a good place. I had no fear. I felt like I was loved and cared for.
Mhm.
And it's like, this place is okay. You're going to be okay.
Okay.
And then I had the little bit of my brain that was semi-conscious saying, well, this is weird. And I'm not afraid, but can I move? Can I make this crumpled up position that I'm in come back to, sitting on the ground, finishing putting my socks on? Do I want to? Like it felt like a moment of choice. And it rem in that moment in saying, okay, this is a choice, I'd read the book A Stroke of Insight by a neuroscientist who had a stroke. That literally popped into my head and said, "Oh no, this is just a tip over while you're putting your socks on, Heather. Get up and finish putting your socks on. Get on with your day. You love your work. Why don't you go to work and stop complaining about this holiday hangover and and get on with, your day." So the practical little in brain or words inside me sort of said, "Okay, I think I can do that." And even though that loving entity sort of said, "We got you over here," I sort of
Mhm.
said, "Well, I'll see you later. I know I'm really glad you're there, but I'm going to go back and finish putting my socks on."
Right. Right. So Heather, you, who you are
Yeah.
here in this physical, that brought you back.
Yeah.
Yeah, some people when they have their NDEs, it's maybe the thought of a daughter or a son or a loved one that they want to come back to. In that instance, you were still kind of with it to a point where you were kind of conversing with yourself like, no, let's get through the day. Quit complaining. Let's get through the day.
And I also really love my work. Like I
Mm-hmm.
feel really like I've got a second wind in my work.
Right.
That I like helping people. I like seeing the progress they can make with the tools that I offer them. And I feel it's like that practical voice inside me sort of said, your work isn't done. You
Mm,
like your work. Go. If you don't like this crumpled up place on the floor, or you don't like the minus 35 that you come back to, go to your cozy clinic, help people. That's a good feeling as well. This isn't, I had two good choices. Both were good choices.
right. So
So
your passion for life and the things you were doing
yeah,
kept you here.
yes, that's more precise than the practical Heather. The
Mm.
practical Heather is got some stuff to work on, and I'm not a perfect being, but I've got a happy life.
It's
And
Yeah,
but
sorry to interrupt you, but I was going to say it's moments like that where you can feel you can and I'm not saying this happens, but I could see that people who have been going through a really hard time and maybe they've lost that passion and fire in their life, if they're presented the same opportunity that you were presented, they have made chose the other way.
yeah,
And you can probably see how easily that would have been, because the way you're describing this, and it goes into one of my questions, was when you were in that existence, you said, you keep saying something that's very telling of your experience, is that either choice was okay for you. You knew that you'd be okay with either choice, which would pose the question, did that experience feel very real when we consider what real is compared to a dream?
more real than any dream I've ever had. Like it had texture. It had, like I say, that moving through mud, that looking down on my body. Like I've had
Mm,
dreams where you're in it, but you're not looking down at your physical crumpled body. That it's like, wow, that's a weird position. Um,
right. Okay.
those sorts of things weren't have never been in any dream I've ever had. Um, and the physical assessment of, okay, can I wiggle my fingers? Can I wiggle my toes? Can I wiggle my eyebrows? What works and what doesn't is like I was coming back into my body after being out of it. And like I said, I don't know whether it was 10 seconds or 10 minutes, but there's no one else in my house. So I don't know how long I was on the floor. And so anyway, it was both were a good choice. And I appreciate your words of my passion for life is the choice that I made. And I feel really good in telling this story. And I did also write the story for my acupuncture journal here in Canada, and it was printed, and have shared it with a number of my clients and my friends. They know this happened to me. And I feel like it's important to share the story and to share some of the experiences and some of the insights I've gained from it.
You said that before you've been a spiritual person, or you've had maybe things in your life. I think a lot of us have private things that happen through our life that we can't explain, or they're a little bit more outside of the norm, and it shapes our belief systems. And some people don't have those at all, and that shapes their belief systems. But it seemed like you had some type of feeling of spirituality, of possibly this wasn't it, and there was something beyond whatever comes from this. Did having that experience magnify that more? after, or has it been something you're trying to come to terms with still? I'm just curious where your thought process is now.
So, yes, I can speak to that. I had a belief of an afterlife before the experience, and I have a belief of an afterlife after the experience. They aligned. The that I am not afraid of, I wasn't afraid of death before. If I would have crossed over at that moment and gone out of this earthly existence and, used the word died, I wasn't afraid of it. I'd had a great run. I've had a really good life and I've had a lot of fun. And in being in that in between place, having that momentary or those thought conversations with whoever is on that other side. And I know some people are greeted by a loved one, or some people are greeted by, a beam of light, or they're basically all different experiences that I've read about. This was just like a caring, loving, we got you. We're here for you. And it wasn't an individual person that came forward, or it was just that feeling of being totally cared for, totally loved, totally accepted in
Mm.
whatever was on that other plane of existence that wasn't very familiar to me. And it aligns with my thought of heaven. And I didn't go into it deep enough to look around and experience it too deep. But it was a comfortable feeling that
Mm.
makes me, at this point, a year and a half later, not afraid of death either. It's a loving place that isn't anything to be feared in my experience of that in between place anyway.
And you didn't feel alone in it. It sounds like you felt like you know,
There were others there. There was other loving entities, and it was familiar. I didn't get a face, or I didn't get a name, or I didn't get a, but it was people that knew and cared and were willing to greet me, like willing to take me by the hand if I wanted to stretch out my hand in that direction. I chose to push up with the other direction and
Mhm.
come back into my body and start wiggling and moving and come seeing if that all worked. Instead, I sort of said, well, glad you're there, but I think I'm still gonna feel out this body and see if it still works. So
Right.
that's what I did.
Wow. This is a really fascinating. I love the work I'm doing right now because each person I talk to, like I said, there are similarities in the experiences, but their experiences are different enough that I get a different vibe. Yours is one of the quickest I've talked to where it's kind of like you weren't fully crossed. You hadn't gone through a tunnel, you hadn't sat with a bunch of elders. Like some people have some really wild experiences when they do these have these NDEs. Yours was, oh hey, I've opened the door and I know you're there, but I'm gonna actually go back for a bit and then we'll see you later. That's the feeling I get. It was just they were there saying, hey, it's up to you, what you want to do. And it was actually going to lead into a question I've never asked any of my NDE guests yet. And I think I don't want to say it's a fun question, but it's kind of an interesting question. And it would be just from your own, doesn't mean you're right, doesn't mean I'm right in this discussion, but your feeling, you look at your life you were having, you felt like you were a healthy individual, everything was going just fine. Everything was, and then this happened. And, I've always wondered about the question of, do we have exit points? Do we have moments in our life that are set up before we come here in case we're like, hey, I've had enough. let's let's go home. I wonder about that. I know it seems kind of an odd idea, but at the same time, I wonder it because yours more than anyone I've talked to seems like everything was going fine, and yet you still suffered this potential life-ending event. So I'm wondering what your thoughts are on exit points.
I like your analogy and I like your lead up to it. I have journaled a lot in this last year. I had some recovery, like to go from a person that was hiking and biking, 4 hours a day, doing their stuff, loving their life, to if I worked last spring and summer 2 hours, I would need to nap for 2 hours just to recover.
Mm.
I've had a lot of time for self-reflection and self-discovery, and I've used journaling, I've had counseling, I've used a bunch of different modalities to recover physically from the ripple effects of this event. Um, so yes, the paralysis was addressed that day, but there were other things going on in my body that caused the stroke to happen that taking longer to address. So all of those have given me a lot of opportunity to be self-reflective and thoughtful and think of exit points and why did I choose to wiggle those eyebrows and toes and fingers and come back? And I think it's important that I share some of those messages. So, yes, I'm contemplating writing a book about this. Yes, I speak to any group that'll have me, any podcast, and tell them about health. And it's more than just, and I am not knocking the emergency room health doctors, and I am very appreciative we have them, but taking responsibility for our own health
Mhm.
and our recovery and not being dependent on drugs that have 100 side effects. I have a bit of a bee in my bonnet about some of those. And knowing that health and recovery is a mental and energetic game as well as a physical and chemistry game. So there's a lot that's brewing in my being to speak to those points. And I feel that has become my purpose in coming back. And I um, really am excited by functional medicine and by the embracing of complementary or alternative medicines. And I feel that my speaking on my recovery in using those modalities um, gives people an alternative to being dependent on chemical medicines and pharmaceuticals that come with a lot of side effects. And just to give you a bit of a historic perspective, my dad has a heart condition and he's had it for 20 years. And again, his body was very, very, very healthy until it wasn't, very much like mine. And he had an event and, you know, he went the pharmaceutical route. And I've really, it's kept him alive and I'm very grateful for that. But his existence really changed as he became affected by the side effects of those medications. So I'm choosing a different path. And yes, I have used some medications and I will. I'm using blood thinners so I don't have another stroke currently,
Right.
but I'm also using a boatload of supplements and acupuncture and meditation and tuning forks and a bunch of complementary medicines to bring me back. And I just recently had an echocardiogram. And yes, I use the tools that modern medicine avails us. And my heart is 10% stronger now this year than it was at the time of the stroke. So I've
Wow.
gained 10%, even though I was a couch potato for the last 2 year or last year and a half and
Mm.
had to really get better slowly with all those tools. So anyway, I'm kind of jumping around from your initial question, but I hope that answers that. Yes, I have a purpose, and yes, I feel like I came back because of that purpose.
Yeah, and it sounds like you do kind of have a thought towards the exit points that, you know, they can happen. Um, you mentioned that a little bit, that you shared that a little bit.
I agree. Yes, I think we are given exit point options. And another thing, I've had three broken noses and concussions with each of them.
Mm.
Any one of those could have caved my skull in worse than that and been an exit point. I know
Right.
what a concussion feels like, and I know
Yeah.
the fogginess, and it's like, wow,
Yeah.
I'm glad that wasn't worse than it was. So, I think if any of us look back and sort of to a bad accident or situation that we had, we might consider that as a potential exit point. And it's like, no, I was just young and foolish and bumped my
Yeah.
head too hard or whatever,
Yeah.
and still had lots to learn. Um, this one was bigger than any of my other options, of course,
Mhm.
in the unconscious state, and the, like I say, feeling like that entity over there saying, "Hey, we got you. We're here for you if you want to come over here."
Yeah.
Or the swimming through mud and wiggling the eyebrows and wiggling the toes and coming back to consciousness slowly as I did choose to. So um, thank you
Yeah.
for bringing up exit points. I do feel that it is there, and I made my choice at that moment.
Yeah. I think it can, a lot of the messages I'm trying to get across to people are really for the people that are still here who maybe lost loved ones, parents, kids, all these things, right? To really come to terms with the idea that, um, because I think there's times where people lose someone and we are grieving so hard because we feel like, oh my goodness, like they didn't even get to have this experience or live it. But we don't know fully if they made that choice too. And I know that's a really hard pill to swallow. It's a hard thing to think about, right? Um, Meaning you made a choice in that moment. Your conscious made some kind of choice to come back. And so, you know, something that can bring relief to people is maybe there was a choice made. And I know that sounds terrible for people who've lost people. Because I've lost someone in the last year or so, and you think, oh, they could have lived another 50 years.
Yeah.
But I don't know if that choice was given to that person, is my point. I don't know. Do you feel anything like that? Does that resonate with you at all?
It does, and I feel like it was totally my choice. Um, that but neither was a bad choice.
Right.
And and I don't know that everybody would say that. Perhaps some people had a rough existence, that they were in poverty, or that they were addicted, or they didn't know where their next meal was coming from. Like, I feel very blessed, and I've had ups and downs in my life, and I've been hungry, and I've been stressed, and I've been worried where I'm going to go and what I'm going to do. But overall, I've had a pretty good existence. And I know there are many people that aren't in the same shoes as I'm in that regard. So knowing that that loving entity was on the other side, it's not a bad choice. Um, and I don't mean to be preachy or be religious and say it's, because I sang in choir, I got to go there. That wasn't it at all.
Mhm.
It's there for everybody. And whether your existence is good or challenging on this plane where we are right now, the other plane is not to be feared. And I think I'm in alignment with any NDE that I've ever read about, or that it's a happy, loving place over there. So it's not
Right.
to be feared. And if you're grieving hard, know that they're in a good place. I too have had loss, and I just trust that they're in a better or easier place than having the challenges. They don't have to face minus 35. It's not minus 35 over there.
Right, right.
There's no wind chill. It's
Here's
like,
here's one that I was interested in asking too quickly here is I don't know if this is going to make sense to you, but is there a part of you, a part of Heather that walks around now, trying to think how I can word this, that you felt in that in between? Meaning, are we confused about who we really are? Our consciousness. We're born in this world, we go to school, we get a job, we do all these things. And I'm looking at you right now and I'm moving my hands and I'm thinking about what I got to do in an hour and all these different things. What part of me, Joe, right now is something that will live on? Because I feel like a lot of the NDEers I've talked to, they still felt like themselves in the in between. Like they were like, "Oh, I was still that person, but not this person." Meaning, are we really aware of who we are? Do you understand what I mean by this?
I do. I feel that it's our spirit, our soul. We talk about that, and having the perspective of Chinese medicine gives me a little, I would say, almost advantage in
Okay.
that Chinese medicine or Oriental medicine or whatever you want to call it, it doesn't have the black and white separation that Western does. It's not body line, mind line, spirit line. They're all kind of swirled together, and you've all seen the yin yang symbol. That a little part of the yin is in the yang, and a little dot of the yang is in the yin.
Mm-hmm.
So we are like that. We are we are part of our spirit, that quiet part that nobody can touch or hurt or that we go to is there when our physical body isn't here. That yin yang of us is the promise of what we will be on the other side or in our next incarnation, if you believe in that,
Mm-hmm.
or what we have always been if we go part back into the part of the whole. So I talked about being a spiritual person or kid. And, that part that I got in touch with as a kid, that when you're having a hard time, when you're being bullied, when you're, you know, crying as a teenager over your first heartbreak or whatever, that part of you is always with you. So all those memories all are swirled into a mix that is unseparatable. It's part of the whole of you, and you become part of the whole of something even bigger and better than you. And it's beautiful. It's not scary or overwhelming or to be feared. It's your core essence is still your core essence, no
Right.
matter how big or small you are.
Yeah, I think the way I've had it described as well is it's not the same as me looking at my camera, but it's the awareness of me. Like my awareness of me is lives on. The awareness of what I am.
Yeah. It's it's an acceptance. I would almost call it an acceptance even more than an awareness.
Okay.
It's, yeah, it's like that's me. That's that essence.
Right. You do acupuncture and you work in Chinese traditional Chinese medicine. Is this something that you, I mean, I would assume this is something you're very strongly encouraging to people if they're needing any type of um, medical interventions and things like that. Is this where you work, or can you explain a little more what you do and how people can contact you and those types of things?
So I have a clinic here in Invermere. Due to the stroke and the heart condition that caused the stroke, my energy level for the physical demands of this job are somewhat less than they were a year and a half ago. Um, and I'm at the age that I contemplate retirement and what that might look like. So I am moving to an online work of health coaching, and I can still do many aspects of the Chinese medicine in my health coaching perspective. So I do a lot of diet therapy, a lot of lifestyle coaching. It really matters what time you go to sleep and how much sleep you get and all those factors. And how much ice cream you eat versus how many broccolis you eat. And so
Right.
I deal with, the physical realities of helping you optimize your health. And I also teach acupuncture, acupressure, where we're going to use the same pressure points that I put needles into. You're going to actually be pressing or putting essential oils on. So all of those things I'm moving into an online platform.
Hmm.
Um, and yes, I love my work. I'm just bringing it to a larger audience, do and with a less physical demands on my body that is still recovering from this incident. I do feel strongly that it's a good option, and I really appreciate that it blends treatment of body, mind, and spirit all into one, and doesn't have the separation or the side effects that some Western medications have. Believe me, I am very glad and very appreciative of Western medications in the proper place, but I do feel that pharmaceuticals aren't the only answer, and that complementaries and integrated medicine and functional medicine are all very supportive and are the trend that we are going towards, in addition to, researching new drugs. So I
Okay.
apologize if that's a bit of a soapbox, but
No.
that's my belief and my experience. And I'm 10% better than I was a year ago when I could do, 14 days in a row. So I feel strongly that this is a good option.
So a combination of current modern medicine with ancient traditional medicine is probably one of the key things, right? And it can help so many people. I mean, I've known even myself healing different ailments. I've had a hand related issue for years playing guitar. And I've recently found that not that I'm encouraging this to anyone, but a B vitamin that I feel I've been lacking has been healing me faster than Advil and I'm not saying Advil is not, it can help people, but I've just recently found this out and all of a sudden I'm healing and I'm completely shocked by it, but not really. Oh,
Nutritional deficiencies are part of our underlying demise of so many of our stress-induced diseases. And stress is impacting so many of our health issues that even your hand and B vitamins is a stress correlation. Anything that we use in such a repetitive pattern is stressed. B
yeah.
vitamins feed help us cope with stress. So it's a kind of
Yeah.
a nutritional no-brainer.
I
For
noticed as soon as I said that, your face was like, "Yep." You knew right away what I was talking about. So, the encouragement to be taking care of your health and looking at not just going the pharmaceutical route doesn't mean don't go to the pharmaceutical route because I'm not encouraging that either, but it's to make sure you're trusting your instincts and finding different things. And you said that you do this on, you're going on online. Is there like, do you have a website or how would people contact you if they want to get in touch with you?
So flourishinghealth.ca is my clinic website, and I'm also developing one for my online business. But that's the best way to get me right now, and it does have an online scheduler. I do offer telehealth sessions on that website, and um, I'd be happy to have conversations with other people with similar experiences or stroke experiences or want a more holistic recovery uh, possibility as they're moving forward through their challenges. So yes, that's the best way to reach me. I'm on Facebook and LinkedIn and all those sorts of social media things. Heather Fischbuch or Flourishing Health. So yeah, I'm in all those places, and it's been a process. And I will be writing a book at some point in the near future as well.
That's perfect. So I encourage everybody that's listening to keep a lookout for the book as well, because I find with writing and books, more comes out as well. I've had NDEers tell me later on the book, I went more in detail. Things come to me more. This is fairly new to you. This experience, I mean, I talk to people who've had experiences 35, 45 years ago, and they're just now telling their story. So I'm really appreciative of you telling your story in such a quick time frame from this plane of existence. But I think because you had such a spiritual not backbone but spiritual, you're already a spiritual person, so it probably just felt right that you're able to share it in such a quick manner. If that makes sense. Some people it's a very personal thing to them.
Comfortable. Yeah, it feels comfortable, and I'm not shy about public speaking or sharing my experiences. Happy that it worked to speak with you today, Joe.
One of the last questions I always ask everybody, and I throw it at some people that aren't even talking about NDEs, and they go, "Whoa, that's a big question." But I think this one will be able to come to you pretty fairly easy, and you might be able to answer it. And it really is quite simple, and it's whatever comes to your heart. But the question is, from a perspective of why Heather's here, why Joe's here, why we're here, why are we here? What is the reason we're here?
To learn to grow to love. I think so much of it comes back to that we enter as really innocent children. We learn and we grow and we have experiences and we love and then we return to that whole mass of love that I peeked through the door at. Um, and I feel in this experience of my lifetime so far that I've learned to love in different ways or more holistic ways. And you know, when I go back to being part of that whole ball of love that's on the other side of that door, I bring that new experience to that. And whether people believe in a, another go round or it's like, okay, I've learned enough. Whatever your belief system is, that um, I think that I've added to that experience by my experience this time around.
Well, I love that, to learn, to grow, and to love. That's perfect. Thank you so much for being on today. I really appreciate you telling your story. And I usually turn to the audience for a moment and just say thank you so much for liking, sharing, and subscribing to the channel. It's been great watching the channel grow and to get the podcast messages out. And again, I encourage everybody to take care of themselves. And thank you again, Heather, for coming on today and sharing your experience with us.
It's been my pleasure, and I hope your readers gain something informative from it.